Welcome again to Champions Network TV, where we are continuing discussing the situation in Zimbabwe. Today, we are just going to briefly talk about what has transpired since the last time we came online, and also I think our focus today will be when the cool head has prevailed and the dust has settled, what might be the priorities for the leadership of Zimbabwe. And with me today to discuss these issues again is Shumba Nyamziwa, yakarara seri neseri kwamachisi.
Yeah.
a geopolitical analyst who enjoys analyzing the monetary policies. Shumba.
Maswera sei Mhzha.
Maswerawo. Zvinenge zviri sei kumaraini kwenyu, kuutano nemhuri?
Haiwa tiri kukika.
Handika.
Kuri sei kumaraini kwenyu?
Isusu kumaraini kwedu kwenkuri right sterek. Tichimbotaura nevamwe vanhu vachimbotipawo maonero avo ezvinhu kuti zvinhu zviri kufamba sei, tikazomboteererawo ma-political players kuti anga achiti chii. But zviri kuita sekunoti things are quieter than anyone could have expected. Saka only the significant yatinayo statement yakaburitswa naPomnodi Geza neZuro Manheru. And a few responses dzinenge dzichizongopiwawo naNick Mangwana on Twitter, not on the official response on any news outlets. I don't know kuti kwamuri imi pane zvamambonzwa here.
Aiwa ndozvendee ndichingoona. It seems the state is doubling down. Iri kungoti, I think it's treating this Wana Comrade Geza as enemies. But from the side Yana Comrade Geza, I can sense that there's some talking going on between. It's not something that I've got evidence for, but it seems like there's some talking to both sides that's happening, because ndaona unge stance yakutorwa nemawo veterans yatichinjei wakutaura zvekuti impeachment, so which means it seems to be coming to go through the law route rather than for a revolution, sort of, which a revolution will transpire and then order will be restored after. So I think there are cooler heads, and I think there's also a way of trying to find out what's the best way forward. So that's my analysis on the sound bites that I've been getting today.
Yeah, and I think on a larger scale, because the quietness, it might actually signify that there might be some informal discussion of the differing parties behind the scenes, where they might be jostling and maybe giving and taking. We don't know. It's only speculation. It's only speculation at the moment. So that's what we have but that's what we have on the ground, and other social media platforms, they tend to be more bipolar. It's either it's going this direction or on this direction, but I think our stance on this platform is to try to give the public information that they can use to make informed decisions.
Yeah, because we want to run away from, because if you look at Zimbabwean politics, it's based on toxicity. So it's about scoring points. If you hear from the opposition's point of view, they are trying to score points, and they've got their own take on what's happening. They see it as a ZANU internal thing. And then, of course, you've got factions in ZANU that this is where this is coming from. And the two sides of those functions, they've got their own take of what's happening. So at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is saying we need the middle of the road. We don't want to get involved in the toxicity of the Zimbabwean politics, which has been a danger to the nation. And then we also don't want to be involved in the factional fighting of ZANU. At the end of the day, as Zimbabweans, what we aspire for is a country that works. We need to turn around our country so that we can enjoy the benefits of its resources as Zimbabweans.
Yeah, you are right, and I think there's also a sentiment that I when I spoke to someone yesterday, what they put it this way, they said Zimbabweans, if you look at the unemployment rate, it's standing at 90%. That means most of the Zimbabweans, they do their own things, and if you call for mass action or anything, they may not take part simply because their livelihood is dependent on kukia.
Yeah, yeah.
Saka hanzi he actually said kuti mazimbabweans vari kuendesa vana kumaboarding, vari kuendesa vana kumauniversity, they are sending people abroad. Izvozvo hazvibvi pamari yekumabasa. Saka whilst you may call for action, the appetite is low, simply because for you to put something in your stomach, you must go out and hustle.
Mm.
So I think that will bring the topic of today, because we want a country that function, that will not depend on hustle, but that the people will actually prosper if they have got the skills and the energy to go to work.
Yeah, because what we need is basically what we need a functioning government. I think the government should not absolve its responsibilities. The government is supposed to provide the environment on which that Zimbabweans can start to innovate. Zimbabweans can start to work for themselves. Zimbabweans can start doing their own thing. Those who choose to go to work will go to work. Those who choose in entrepreneurship will do entrepreneurship. But the government needs to create that enabling environment. That's the whole purpose of having a government.
Okay. I think we are going to be joined by our friend from Uganda, Henry, and I think he will be part of us. He's in the waiting room at the moment. So I'll bring him in. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Hey, welcome, Mr. Henry. You are muted.
Thank you very much. I'm Henry Makabai from Uganda. I actually work with the Uganda Electoral Commission, and I'm currently the District Election Administrator of Kampala Electoral District, which is in the capital city. And I'm glad to be part of this.
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Henry.
And Shumba
Yes,
is a Zimbabwean. He is a geopolitical analyst, and he enjoys talking monetary policies. And before you joined us, we had just recapped what has been happening in Zimbabwe. Maybe you may be aware, there is political tension, where the
Oh, yeah.
liberation war heroes of our nation are not happy with what is happening, and they've leveled a number of allegations against the sitting president. And I think on the 31st, there was a call for mass demonstration, which turned out to be mass stay away. And
Yeah.
we were following, and I think it seems there's not been any formal response from our authorities to say what are they doing about it. And the war veterans went further to give a statement that their next move is to impeach the president on the basis that he is no longer mentally capable of running the government, and also other corruption allegations. So, but maybe we may want, from an international perspective, of course, we have followed the politics of Zimbabwe, I think, from a long time. Maybe you may give just a view, an international view from your perspective.
Thank you very much. The situation of Zimbabwe is one where the government is under a leadership that emerged from a liberation movement. And that's not far from the Ugandan situation. And in these countries where we've had liberation movements taking charge, there are normally challenges between the elite and the semi-literates who were part of the struggle. That's where a lot of differences normally start arising from. The intellectuals feel they have the brains to take charge of the country. The fighters say, if we had not fought, the intellectuals wouldn't be having this free ride. And then contradictions start arising along the intelligentsia and the fighters who had limited level of education. Now, when it comes to the actual governance, you find that there is a tendency of deviating from the ideals of the liberation movement. My memory of the Zimbabwe case is that, one, during the Amin's regime, I was a little boy. I remember there were freedom fighters who were passed out. I witnessed that pass out at Entebbe Botanical Gardens. And then about a year after that, 2 years after that, actually, in 1980, because this passed out in 1978 and 1980, that's when there was the overthrow of the government. Then that's when Robert Mugabe's came into power, and then after that there was then there had to be a merger with a group of Abel Mzorewa.
No, it was they merged with the group for Joshua Nkomo.
Joshua Nkomo, yes. So now when you find that within such a liberation movement, ordinarily there should be a leadership hierarchy. There should be preparations for a transition. And the case that has given a good example of transition leadership has been the case of the Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania, whereby one may have served in the army, but there has been always a tendency that the moment one transitions into the position of becoming Minister of Foreign Affairs, chances are that in a few years he's the person who is to take on the succession mantle. Now, in the cases of, say, Zimbabwe, you find a situation where the comrades in struggle disagree at some point in time, where those who have strong ideas end up being marginalized. And then the sycophants, those who always want to hype, or to sing the tune that they believe the leader needs to listen to, take center stage. And they kind of hold the leader hostage, to the extent that when the leader even considers retiring, they say, please, you are the only option. Where are you going to leave us? That's the kind of mentality. And over time, they develop a mentality they develop a sense of entitlement. Entitlement to the extent that they have to win maybe an election by hook or crook. And they do not see any life outside being in power. Now, that also means that the establishments need always to prepare for such transitional arrangements, that in case one is out of power, what is the fallback position? There is always the tendency of the fear for being followed up for maybe what they may have done. And that's why you find that we need a situation where, as the African nations, we need to look at this together, because each of the countries in Africa has the potential of degenerating into such a situation. And my little grandson is interfering, but fine. How are you, Stefan?
Yeah.
And so there is need for that kind of preparation, where then one is sure that if I left power, maybe I will be pardoned for what I may have done, a certain extent of pardoning, and then they are sure that there is no follow-up. So you find now the situation where corruption becomes prevalent. Then now in the case of Zimbabwe, where they are talking of insanity, of course, those who are towing that line have to consider there has to be a medical report to that effect, that the president is insane as a mental instinct. Otherwise, it's not an ordinary judgment. It's not an ordinary judgment that one has a mental problem. But of course, the issues of corruption can be easily followed up. But at the end of the day, it's now an issue of the strengths within the camps that have emerged within the country. The strength of the camps is the camp that is pushing for the impeachment really strong enough, having the authority, having you find is the army, is the police on the side of those who are pushing for the impeachment. And if it is not, then you find they themselves now will be followed up and criminalized, and at the end of the day, the country will remain in that cycle.
Okay. Right. I think you've touched quite a number of issues there. You talk the historical perspective of the context of Zimbabwe, but one thing that you have really zeroed in was the deviation from the liberation ideals. That is always the bone of contention of the liberators and the elite that then take the lead. And one handicap that we have is we don't have a proper succession plan to say how do we transcend from one leader to another, and then the people that are around the leader, they may feel if the leader goes away, when they get another one, their livelihood may be jeopardized. Then they are then kept as hostage. Shumba, any comments and addition to
Yeah,
what
I think
our brother leader or from Uganda is put
yeah, I
across?
think he hit the nail on the head, to be honest, because this is what we grapple with across the African continent. And I liked the example that he gave in Tanzania. You need that kind of sophistication in planning for your succession. Because what normally happens, like what we are seeing in Zimbabwe, mainly you might see even the president himself doesn't want to continue beyond that term. But people who are benefiting, because it's all about incentive, it's a psychological problem of incentives, whereby people are benefiting. They create a bubble around the president. So even for him to know what exactly is happening on the ground, he's not told exactly what's happening, because these people, they are there to shape the narrative so that they keep on benefiting. So that's where, as liberation movements, most of them lost the way, because for a true leader you need to go into to these communities without most of these people surrounding you, and see how the ordinary people are living day to day. I see it with the Chinese president Xi Jinping. You go, sometimes he's deep in the Chinese rural villages with rice farmers, with ordinary household wives, with young people in universities. So he's gauging the temperature of finding out what exactly is going on within the nation, rather than to wait for someone to tell him that this is going on, this is going on. So we need that. And then one point that, like I said, which he really hit the nail on the head, was the Chama Chama Pinduzi in Tanzania, the succession plan. I wish all liberation movements had such a succession plan. You need that sophistication. It might not be so apparent, but you need intelligent people, to create some of these things, whereby someone maybe who is appointed to be foreign affairs minister. It's an unwritten rule that that person becomes he's almost a de facto president. He's a president in waiting. So those are the things that we need to create. When we see someone being elected to the foreign affairs in Zimbabwe, you might choose another post for that and say, once we see someone there, Zimbabwe, and that gives, it gives confidence, whether it's in business, the community. Already they are starting to evaluate that person and say whether that person is a good leader or is not a good leader. Because once they see that, the person who has been appointed foreign minister is a capable person, you can see even the business confidence, even the societal confidence, it's boosted, because they know the country is in capable hands. This idea that you go on a you just you are just left to chance to say, oh, things will turn up. I think that's where the biggest problem is. So yeah, I totally agree, and I would want to thank his contribution on that.
And I think is the right man to say it, because he's seeing it from
The
outside.
inside and outside as well.
Inside and outside as well. And I think there was also another point that you mentioned earlier on when you were in the back room of about the leader of Burkina Faso, the current leader. And Magufuli was one of the people who also mingles with these people, and the country actually begin to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Henry, what we want to also do today is not only to talk about the challenges that we are having. We know these challenges, they are going to settle one day. But I think what we wanted to achieve today is to say, whoever then goes in charge after the dust is settled, what priorities should they put across? It might be today it is Zimbabwe, tomorrow it might be Uganda, or the other day it might be another different nation. But what can we learn from history that we can then use as a template going forward? And I think Shumba had some ideas to put on the table. Shumba.
Yeah, so my idea is I'm borrowing it from after the 1929 Great Depression in America. So after the Great Depression, there was a high unemployment rates in America because the world economy sort of collapsed. We know of 2008 when we had that global financial crisis. The world economy sort of collapsed, but in 1929, it was on a massive scale. So a lot of people lost their jobs, especially in the Western world. And then when President Roosevelt was elected into office, he realized the state had to get involved in changing the psyche of the nation, or to change the direction of the nation, because he realized that you could not left it to companies or capitalism alone to readdress the unemployment. So he basically sort of came up with about five things on his reform agenda. So he had the banking reform. Because after 1929 crash, most banks became insolvent, and because most of the times you see that these banks will be playing chicanery with the economy. This is the problem of unregulated capitalism. People become greedy, and they can put the country at risk for their own benefit. And then the second thing he did was emergency relief programs, and then the third was the working relief programs, and then agricultural programs, and then the Social Security Act. So all this was in the short term to alleviate the unemployment that had arose due to the great crash. So, and then long term, he was bringing in the federal government to get involved in the economics and the economics of the country, and to shape the direction of America after post the crash. So for us, and to our politicians, whether in Uganda or in Zimbabwe, I think the priority should be the people. And how do we address the needs of the people? We address the needs of the people by creating things like New Deal. For Zimbabwe, after the dust has settled, the grievances, people have highlighted their grievances. There's a problem with infrastructure in Zimbabwe. There's a problem with education. There's problems with the healthcare. So what we need is a new deal for Zimbabwe. What does a new deal for Zimbabwe look like? To alleviate the unemployment rate. Mhzha, you spoke of the unemployment rate standing at 90% at the moment. And one thing we said in the previous episodes was Africa has got the youngest demographics of all continents. I think I was reading Mr. Makabai that Uganda, the average age of a Ugandan is 18 years old. Yeah. So it shows you how young Africa is, and the energy. We underestimate the energy that comes with such young demographics. So what we need is to plan for the future for this young generation. And how do we do it? The governments need to start doing what we call works programs. So it means those infrastructure problems that we are talking about, like roads building, they need to start recruiting these young people into works program, even at minimum wage, but they are working to sort out that infrastructure we are crying about every day. And then healthcare, you need also to bring in these young people to be able to work in healthcare and fill in the gaps. So these are the things that we need to start thinking about. And then we also need to start thinking about giving unemployment benefits, because some people struggle. And then healthcare, we need to know how we can fund healthcare. There are very different models of funding healthcare. We don't want our people to be over-reliant on the government. We could say those people who don't work, the government caters for them. But as soon as you start working, you share the burden with the government. I think I've lived in Australia before. I've seen of all the countries in the world, I think I respect the Australian funding for healthcare. And if we can adopt that kind of system, I think it's it will go a long way in helping the health of the nation. And then we need to address things like food security, like I said, and then national security. So all those are the priorities that post some of these problems that we have. Our governments need to really focus on and look at and say, what are they doing? They need to come to the people to say, this is what we are doing. It's no use just having sound bites. We're going to do this. We've got a 10-year plan. And when the 10-year plan comes, nothing is done. So we need something with that is measurable, so that when people can see the change and appreciate that change, that things are being done to move our countries forward. I think that's my take on a new deal for Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Shumba. I know Henry is going to respond, but before he responds, let's have a little break, and we appreciate our sponsor of our tonight's program, which is Mutulima Exports Uganda Limited, which is a company that exports fresh products throughout the world from Uganda. And I think Henry will be interested to know that this is the company that is promoting Uganda, and we also give them their contact details for those who want to do business with them. Those are their contact details. They've got contact details in Uganda, and they've got contact details in the United Kingdom. So we appreciate their support for our program. Then we come back. Henry, you have heard the new deal as
thank you. I've heard. Yeah, for me, I would say I think Africa needs to get back to the basics. And by the basics, I'm now making reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to assess the levels of needs of our society and start providing for them as such. You find the bulk of the population is at the basic level: food, clothing, shelter. Those are the basics that we are striving for. Can we satisfy those and then move to the higher levels? Because different sections of our society demand different things. Very few people in Africa have reached the level of self-actualization. It is actually those who are struggling for the power up there that are talking about self-actualization. I should also be a president. I should also be a minister. But when the common African is sleeping hungry, the common African cannot produce food when there is rain, when there is drought, when there is a lot of sunshine. And yet during a lot of rain, we are letting the water flow. We are not thinking about basic dams from which we can tap water when the sun prevails. And at the end of the day, the issue is that we should first of all think about our food, clothing, and then Medicare. And you find, especially if water hygiene is provided for, then you find a number of the diseases would be dealt with. A number of the diseases, you find things like diarrhea, dysentery, even malaria. You find if basic public health programs are carried out, the lives of these people would be very different. And the easiest way to liberate a person is, first of all, is to liberate them from hunger.
Yeah.
If they are liberated from hunger, then you can take them to other levels. But for as long as a person is hungry, then you will have a problem with that person. And that's why you find that in Uganda, whereas we've had conflicts, these conflicts have not degenerated so much because most Ugandans cater for their own food needs. We don't depend on the prices set by the government for food stuffs. So you will not expect when prices rise for people to go demonstrating, because in one's backyard, they have food stuffs that they could be growing themselves. So basic liberation from hunger is the starting point. Look at health, if basic health care is provided for, and then education, relevant education system.
Yeah.
A relevant education system, especially where there is a focus on entrepreneurship, a focus on artisanship, and skilling these Africans would really go a long way into making them self-employed, because you find employment in the formal sector is so limited. You find that in Uganda we're about 300,000 civil servants in a population of 45 million shillings. So 45 million people.
Yeah.
So you find we are a very small section, but and then you find the private sector maybe employs about another 2 or 3 million people. And the issue of a living wage is not an issue that is yet of concern, because the moment you go into that, then you will find companies trimming down the workforces. So you find the forces of demand and supply of labor dictating the rates that have to be paid. But now, then the other issue is to sanitize the politics. Sanitizing the politics, Uganda had attempted to sanitize politics by minimizing the activity of political parties at some point in time, where we're under what they call a movement system. The polarization in society was limited at the time. But the moment we opted for full-scale multi-party politics, where you must agree with your party even when its policies are so bad, that has caused lots of polarization. It has also caused lots of entry points for those who would wish to destabilize Africa. Because now they can go into these small factions, deal with them, to isolate them, so that the country does not move as a united country.
I think
so it's really it's really lots of things that ought to be looked at. But like I said, let's start from the basics. Let's stratify our society, identify the basic the needs of each section of society, and try to address those needs as such. But if we look at the population as a homogeneous population, then we miss the point.
Thank you very much, Henry. I think you have really bring it to the basics. You have explained the New Deal in a basic format. That let's come back to the basics and start with the food, then coming to health, education, and the education has to be a relevant education, not just the head knowledge that you can't apply in your day-to-day living. Do you want to add any comment, Shumba?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, this the thing is, with especially the point he spoke about politics, I think we need a realignment of our politics. What I find very disturbing is when we talk of politics in Africa, especially this multi-party democracy, nobody has really sat down to question whether it's working for us. We don't go back to evaluate some of this kind of environment, whether it works for us. The reason why I say that is, you go to the West itself, they are promoting multi-party democracy in Africa, but go to the UK, the third part, you find it for many years it was almost a two-way race horse. You go to America, there's no chance a third party will ever emerge in America. And if you look at the way they do the politics, they will say China is one party state, but what you'll find is when the Democrats get into power and the Republicans get into power, Congress actually holds most of the power in America. That's why you find that countries like Russia, they are very skeptical when they say when Trump says, let's sign this agreement, because he knows if the Congress doesn't endorse that deal, it's a non-matter, because what Congress has put down on paper is what matters in America. Obama tried to remove the sanctions on Cuba, which has been there for 60 years, more than 60 years. But because Congress refused, even if he does temporary measures, when a new president comes in, those temporary measures are through the window. So as Africans, we also need to have a kind of politics that understands that consistency is very important. We need political parties that are aligned to our objectives, not that those are funded externally. Because most of the multi-party democracy that we have in our countries, they are not of our own creation. They are being sponsored from outside with the outside interests. Because these people who are sponsoring them, they are looking at their interests of what they can benefit from Zimbabwe, what they can benefit from Uganda. Until we have a homegrown kind of politics, then we will always have these problems. We need to say, if we are doing democracy in Africa, I think there should be a standard of making sure all these, we might differ on ideology like socialism, like Pan-Africanism. Some people might want to say, no, we don't want this Pan-Africanism, doesn't save us, right? We just want to be Uganda, or we just want to be Zimbabwe and confined to the nation state. You differ on those ideologies, but your national goal is the same. This is what the Americans do. This is what the British do. When you see the British in the House of Commons, their foreign policy going forward, outward, is the same, no matter what party comes into power. You go to America, is the same. They might make tweaks here and there, but it's largely the same. So until Africa gets to that point to say, Uganda, its foreign policy is the same going outward, whether it doesn't matter which political party comes into power. Because what you'll find in Africa, one party comes into power, it becomes cozy with the West, it privatizes all the state companies because it's being told what to do, and it doesn't benefit anyone in the long run. And then another party comes into power, it takes again all those privatized things, and then it's just a merry-go-round because there's no consistency in policy. So what we need in Africa is political parties that are mature, that are driven by ideology, that really sort of serve the needs of the nation, prioritize the Maslow hierarchy of needs that my brother have just mentioned. So I think that's all I can say for now. I think that was a brilliant point on on the kind of politics that we have in Africa. This multi-party sort of politics is not serving us well, and we need to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, that's. I think this has been one of the most interactive discussion. I don't know if I will have time to call in and send a voice note of what you wanted to contribute. What do you think? It's 7 minutes long.
Yeah, we might just play it, but we needed to finish early today.
Okay, all right. Let me. What do you think, Henry? We had someone who was supposed to be part of us, and he couldn't join, and he sent a voice message. Can we play it? Let me see.
Good evening, gentlemen. I hope you are well. My network always is an issue around this time. So what I just wanted to contribute is on the topic about the way forward, what we need or what we expect to be doing to push the country forward. We are currently working on some researches, but though funding is the problem at the moment, we are working on researches to create employment at household level, because we identified that as a solution to the problem of employment. The design that we have for employment doesn't really work, because people focus on factories and other issues. But before one goes to the factory, we are overlooking the fact that we need to produce food. So every household must be capacitated to produce food. And the solution to that, we identified that we need to look into our settlement systems. Currently, the settlement systems that we have, they are not creating the environment for creating that employment that we are talking about. Because if people are settled in a system whereby they can practice integrated farming, there are so many components to integrated farming that generates foods, that generate energy, that also manage waste, and also generates income. So we are currently working on that project, and we can share the details with those who are interested working with us. Currently, we are just looking at working on prototypes in 5 different countries in the southern region to see, in fact, to collect tangible data. We know the results. We just need to make it scientific, collect the data, and then work out the actual program for the smart settlement, because we call it smart settlement, but in actual fact, it's integrated farming. So the other components on integrated farming is education. It is also aligned with education and also aligned with some basic skills that are needed at every household so that the integrated farming system works. And as we do the prototype, we will be also working on the curriculum. to develop the curriculum that will work on these settlements. They are not going to be just settlements for people to settle, but our people needs to be advanced to a certain level, whereby to survive, you need to have certain skills at your household. And at the same time, this program decommercialize a lot of skills. There are skills that are being commercialized, and they need to be they need to be decommercialized and be common knowledge. Like, for example, brick masonry. You don't need to find a specialist to build a house for you. There are other skills that are mentioned in our document that we need to impart to the people, like fish farming, organic farming, foundry technology, and other things, because we believe that as people do these activities at their households, they must also be in a position to make their own tools. You see, in other words, we are also trying to cut the cost of production. Like, for example, the food production. Food production can achieve zero cost input because everything will be found at your household, like manure, even seeds. You can also generate your own seeds. We need to decommercialize seed production. So yeah, we are working on this project to see how we can develop, because some of the development that we aspire, without necessary capacity, you cannot achieve anything, especially food production. If there's no food, nobody can be productive. And if you look, all the people who left Zimbabwe to go abroad and everything, what are they really searching for? Is it not food? And can they not produce the food themselves? The other thing is just that they are not given that room, or that they were not given the necessary skills to produce their own food. So those are some of the issues that we'll be looking for, and we'll be looking at to see how we can develop not only Zimbabwe, but the continent. Because what I'm talking about is not a problem to Zimbabwe only, but it's an African universal problem that needs to be addressed.
That was his submission. I think it is resonating with what Henry expounded earlier on, to say the basics that we need food, we need education, people need this, the education has to be with the right skills. And I think what he was coming up with is almost like a sample of how things can be done. But I think Henry can comment on it, because I think earlier you said one of the strength of Uganda is they have got you have got food security, so that if anything happens, it doesn't affect the common man on the ground. Do you want to just
Yeah,
give some pointers
yes.
for how you, as a country, you are managing your food security?
I think the management is essentially by chance. Why? Because there is no technical intervention in this. It's just the cultural practices that the people have developed over the years
Yes,
that
yeah.
have kept them surviving. But the weather is very friendly. By and large, the weather is very friendly. It can rain very heavily, say from midnight up to midday. And by 4 o'clock of the same day, it will appear as if there has never been any rain at all in this country of ours.
Mm.
So you find the weather is so conducive that actually there is a time I had an Arab friend who invited me to his office. He asked me whether I was not busy, and he asked me to go and join him to have a cup of coffee in his office. Well, I went, and you know one thing he told me? He told me, you people don't know the kind of luck that Uganda has. He had thrown rotten tomatoes through his window sill, and after 3 weeks, they were very fat seedlings. And he was telling me way back in his home country, he needed to pump water from 300 meters underground to irrigate his farm. So, like I said, it's by chance because the weather is so conducive. There is no technical input. Actually, for me, I think even our Ministry of Agriculture is kind of a liability. And for countries like Africa, because I mean, it's not adding value to that. It's budgeted for, but you don't see the trickle down. So,
but that's the nature of all African governments,
exactly,
except a few. Yeah,
accepted. So you find that if, for example, Africa were to leverage on agriculture, I think the best countries we would deal with are the arid countries, those which have hardly any water but are doing very well. They would teach us how to make our countries food baskets for the entire continent and for the rest of the world.
No,
Managing
you know, Mr. Makabai, sorry to interject. I was listening to this geopolitical podcast this afternoon.
Yeah.
I spoke to Mhzha a few days ago. I said they are coming for Africa. Why? Exactly to your point that you have just mentioned. They say 60% of agricultural land with agricultural potential is in Africa. 60% of the world's land with that agricultural potential is in Africa. So which means you've got all these multinational corporations which are in agriculture. You've got all the commodity traders in agriculture. They're all eyeing towards Africa. And when we spoke, I will send you the clip that we were talking in one of our videos. This is a guy who is very close to Trump. He's a billionaire, he's a British. He said, Trump, he says, unbeknown to a lot of people, Trump wants to wrap up the war in Ukraine. He wants to wrap up the war in the Middle East. And then his focus will be on Africa. Yeah, because he sees the resources in Africa. And he wants America to have a share. His actual aim is to kick China out of Africa. Whether you will succeed, that's another thing. But for us, it spells disaster, because if you've got these great powers playing that game, who is going to suffer? We are the grass that will suffer when two elephants are fighting. So you are straight. You are really to the point that most of our ministries of agriculture, they don't even have a clue what we are sitting on. It's not even it's in every
the ministries for urban development. Even the ministries for urban development. What development are they
mining?
Even
mining. Yeah, you said earlier when you said that you need education that is tailored to the needs of the nation. You look how many people do mining engineering in Africa, how many do geology. We have geologists coming from abroad. They identify the petroleum in Uganda. They identify gas fields in Zimbabwe. They identify gas fields in Mozambique. And they are the ones who are going to benefit billions of dollars out of it, because we can't even make the calculations of how much resource they are mining from those sources. So this is our dilemma. Until we come to that level of educating our people to say, this is the resources of our country, we're going to educate our kids to manage these resources, then we just not going anywhere.
Yeah, I
There's
think
a program that was started in Uganda recently called the Skilling the Youth Program.
mm-hmm.
I visited one of these centers recently when we were working on updating our voters register. And I came across something very interesting, that people are being taught carpentry, they are being taught electronics, repair, electronics and what have you in the local language. And
Wow.
if this is normally meant for people who have dropped out of school, say basically primary school, and they have not had an opportunity to continue, to give them some skills. Then when I met one of the tutors there, I said, very recently, they got a student, a university graduate of engineering, who managed to find himself into their program and was attending an electronics class. And he said the approach they were using at that skilling center really simplified the things so much so that he understood more about electronics from this elementary kind of class compared to the calculations and what have you that he was doing at university.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
how then education needs to be brought down to its basics. We study a lot of things, and the relevant things that we use in work are very limited. Can we break this down to identify what do we need and therefore focus on that to teach? What are the strengths of the child? Build on those strengths. Is it music? Can they play guitar? I was telling my relatives one time I was in the village that, you know, if you've taken a child to school and then they are telling you they are finding difficulty in coping with what goes on in class, the option then is to sit them aside and say, what do you think you can do if you feel your brain cannot grasp what goes on in class? I said, well, if somebody suggests business, set aside what you would have paid for their school fees for a term. Give it to them to start something. Of course, they are likely to fail at some point in time. Have that in mind. But it is from that failure that they will learn that, well, when I invested 300,000 Uganda shillings, I bought this and its price fell all of a sudden. They will not burn their fingers a second time. It will be a learning curve. The next time, if you gave them the same amount of money and tell them this marks the end of it. If you squander this one, then you are gone. Of course, it would be just an empty threat, but for them to know that, well, it's not just when I fail, I'll get back and I'll be assisted. At the end of the day, you'll find such people being the ones supporting even those whom you have seen through the entire education career, through university. So
Yep.
I think the issue is to establish the strengths of our people. What is one strong, and then try to develop those strengths. We have a program in Uganda called the Plan for Modernization of Agriculture, whereby people are given in every parish, I think these basic units, actually, for those of us who are in colonial, British colonies, I think we have similar administrative structures.
Yeah.
Where we have a parish or a ward where they select 100 people in a parish and each is given 1 million shillings to do something. But you find now, if you're 100 people, you are likely to compete amongst yourselves doing the same business. At the end of the day, you may not make much progress. And yet, if you pull these resources together, I was telling a group of people in my place one time, I was telling them, we grow a lot of Arabica coffee, very good Arabica coffee. we have a sub-county which has 5 parishes. And these 5 sub-counties produce a very good quantity and quality of Arabica coffee. If these 5 sub-counties pool their resources as a community, not as individuals, and then the 500 million shillings, if they bought like a coffee roaster for 100 million shillings, a coffee huller for 100 million shillings, and a coffee dryer for another 100 million shillings, that's 300 million shillings. Then whoever produces coffee in this sub-county markets it together as a premium coffee. In a very short time, all of us will be rich. Other than giving each one of us 1 million shillings and we compete amongst ourselves, selling ripe sweet bananas, selling cabbages at the same market. At the end of the day, we may not have anything to show. But if we focused on this crop that the whole world really treasures, and then we roast our coffee at the source so that nobody fears that there has been any contamination in transit from the garden to the roastery to the packaging and then straight to somebody's cup. Definitely that community is likely to be transformed in a very short time. So I think it's about getting our priorities right, dealing with selfishness and greed at the levels that have access to public resources. And that's where the power struggles are, selfishness and greed. Whose turn is it to be greedy? Whose turn is it to take on the lion's share? But
exactly.
If we focused on what the population needs, I think there is enough for all of us.
There's plenty, actually.
There's plenty, actually, there's surplus.
Right. I think we have been on here for more than 2 or 3 of the sessions before. But before I forget, Henry, you have spoken about the skilling the youth and the agricultural planning for modernizing agriculture. I think if you can get in touch with anyone from those schemes that we can co-opt, and at one point that's how they can come and talk to us about what they are doing there, it will be very helpful. And do you have any other comment, Shumba, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to wrap up. I would just say, I think Mr. Makabai has been quite helpful in our discussion, because learning from other countries is also very important. Yeah. If you look I always go to Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. You know, a lot of people, they don't know that the development of China actually came from looking towards Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew said when, what's his name, after Mao came to visit Singapore, he said, how did you do this? Because he saw the development in Singapore. And he emulated that. So that's what our leaders, sometimes you wonder, our leaders, they travel all this world. They go to Singapore, they go to China, they go to America, but still we remain in the same place. They are not really, they are not incentivized to say, how can we change our systems? And the thing is, they like to photo shoot in New York, Manhattan. Why are you not bringing that Manhattan to Africa? Huh? You pose for photos in Beijing, you pose for photos in Singapore. We need to be starting posing for photos in Africa so that we can sell Africa. Because the more I'm taking photos in London, I'm selling London to the world. We need to start. I go to Kampala, I take photos in the skyscrapers of Kampala, send them that this is what Uganda is like. Like Winston Churchill said, Uganda is the pearl of Africa. This is what my brother has just said. We don't know what we are sitting on. if these people had their way and they take Africa, I think you will see the innovation that will come with. So we need to start innovating like all other nations and build those infrastructure that when I go to the West, I'm pausing behind. We need those infrastructures in Africa, not in the West, so that we can bring dignity to our people. We can bring fun to Africa. We can bring that paradise to Africa. And Africa is the richest continent by far. And our youth need to know it's just being resourceful and having the innovation to exploit those resources to our benefit that will make our future bright. I think that's all I can say for now.
Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough, and for Mr. Makabai, it's a double thank you, because I just told you this. I would just say this evening to say, can you come along, and then you avail yourself, prepared.
And that's how I ended up a bit late. That meeting took a little longer than I expected, but I'm glad I was able to make it.
And to those who are viewing, we are not. Yes, Zimbabwe is going through some dark time, but I think this meeting has actually taken our minds ahead of around the corner to say what is possible if level-headed people prevail and the right decisions taken. We are going to be again online. Do we agree to come back Saturday?
Okay.
You're muted, Shumba.
We can meet on Saturday.
Saturday is fine.
Okay. What I will do is obviously we could have discussed what topic can we tackle and which direction can we take. But what I'm going to do for this I'm going to create a high intellectual WhatsApp group where we can share ideas and also shape the direction we'll be going as the people who will be coming on the panel here. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Viewers,
I will
thank
link
you.
up with a friend of mine called Washington Mudewe, who was I don't know that he still works with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. He would really be of good insight into what's happening in Zimbabwe, because he is based there.
Okay, that would be good. That's the good of connecting. We will be able to bring this conversation then goes to the right people.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than speculating, sometimes the idea is we just speculate, this is happening. But if we hear it from the horse mouth, like Mr. Makabai said, he gives us an insight onto how the Ugandan system works, how it's running. So at least we've got an idea we've got a true picture of things that are going on, rather than just speculating.
I think when he's free, you tell us about his challenges on the last election, the by-election, where
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. All right. So thank you, gentlemen, and we close the broadcast for now. But we can still come back in the back room.